Defend yourself against DDoS attacks by hiding your true IP address with ExpressVPN, and visit my custom link expressvpn.com/ghilliemaster in the description to find out how you can get an extra 3 months free. Hey everyone, and welcome back to another GTA Online video here on the channel. In this game, there are tons of different settings that you can change in order to optimize your gameplay, and in this video, I'm going to be talking about many different settings that you should be changing to improve not just in PvP, but all aspects of the game. These are things that I've come to use over the years as a day one player, and they come in handy a lot, so if you're somewhat new to the game, I'm confident that you will learn a thing or two in this video. And perhaps if you've been playing a while, maybe you also don't know some of these settings. Starting off with a very important one, this is the first-person vehicle hood option, and this is mostly useful for PvP scenarios, but I would also say it does improve visibility in any flying vehicle, regardless of what you're doing. What this setting does, if you don't know, is it changes your first-person view to be from the hood of the car instead of from the inside. In helicopters like the Sparrow here, the regular first-person view isn't that bad, you can still see a lot, and it's still somewhat usable, but in other vehicles like the Deluxo or jets, it makes a huge difference. You can just see so much more, and you're also going to be closer to the front of the aircraft, which can help with seeing targets around your end from farther away than you would without the setting turned on. If you care about performing well in PvP, this setting is a must-have, and if you are on the PC version on controller, you actually don't have to turn the setting on in the options to use it. If you click the right stick, you'll just be taken into the first-person vehicle hood option just like that. For some reason, they didn't bring this option to consoles. I really wish they did because it would be very useful for the people who also like to have that immersion of being in first person, but also who want the PvP advantage using the first person vehicle hood. Up next, we have the depth of field setting and motion blur. I'm including both of these here because they both have to do with blurring the game. Depth of field makes it to where if you are aiming at a certain object, everything else will blur out, like you're focusing on that certain thing. It's one of those settings that makes the game look more cinematic at the cost of just overall visibility. For example, let's say I'm in a sniper fight against another player, and we're trading shots between these trees. My scope is just going in and out of focus over the trees, and the depth of field is constantly changing on what to focus, blurring the tree or blurring the background where my target is, which is reducing my visibility. And let's say I'm trying to take cover and use the third-person camera to look behind a wall to see where the enemy is. Well, if I'm ADSing at the tree or a wall, it's going to blur out what I'm trying to actually look at behind the tree or the wall. So turning the setting off fixes all of that, makes everything crystal clear. And for motion blur, this is one of the first settings I turn off in every single game I play. I cannot stand motion blur. All it does is reduce visibility. So reduce that to none and you'll be able to see a lot better, especially combined with turning the depth of field effect off. Another setting that helps you see better is the first-person field of view slider. I forget where the default setting is on this, but you absolutely want to max out your FOV. Even at max FOV, I still feel like it should be a bit wider. But comparing the lowest FOV to the highest FOV, you can see that at the lowest one, we can't see those extra objects off to the side because it's so zoomed in. But when we swap over to max FOV, those objects can now be seen from the same exact position. It just lets you see a whole lot more on your screen at once, which helps out in both PvP and PvE. A very simple setting to change is another first-person one. This is called first-person head bobbing. When you have this on, when you run in first-person mode, every step you make, your screen will kind of shake to simulate you taking the step. Not only does this just make you sick, in my opinion, from the constant motion, but it can make it harder to line up shots too because the camera was always going to be shaking while you're running. So turning it off will make it feel like other FPS games you may have played in the past and gotten used to, which is a whole lot better in my opinion. Moving on, you would be surprised just how many times I get asked about the so-called special reticle as opposed to the standard dot. In the display settings, there's an option for weapon target with the option of either complex or simple. By default, this would be on simple, which leaves you with a dot reticle for every single weapon in the game. This is an objectively worse reticle. Switching it to complex will give you a different style of reticle for each gun. For assault rifles, it's going to be just a simple crosshair. For pistols, it's a circle with a dot in the middle. Shotguns, you have a dot with two half circles surrounding it. Rockets is a box, and so on and so forth. And the main reason why complex is so much better is the feedback that it gives you. Notice how when I shoot my assault rifle, as I continue to shoot with the complex reticle, it gets wider and more spread out. This is giving me live feedback on how much bloom my weapon is going to have as I continue to fire. It's going to show how much accuracy I'm losing as I continue to shoot the weapon. So if I'm ever in a PvP situation and find myself firing my gun for a while, I know if I need to hit that zoom in button to tighten up the accuracy, instead of having the dot where you don't get that feedback and end up missing a ton of shots because the game's not telling you that your shots aren't going where your dot is. Not only that, with shotguns, they don't just hit where the dot is displayed. The shotgun complex reticle does a good job of showing where your pellets are going to land and where you have to aim to hit pellets on the target, which is more than just where the dot is pointing. It's a much wider area. So if you haven't switched to complex yet, I highly recommend making that switch and trying to get used to it. It'll help you out in the long run. Now let's talk about control schemes. This is one where it comes a lot down to personal preference. However, there are some clear advantages and disadvantages to some of them. For third person, I have been playing GTA games for a long time, so running without the A or X button just feels too weird to me. I can't do it. So I always use the standard control scheme and play claw to move the camera around while I'm running in third person. But I do know this way is technically not the best because it puts you at a disadvantage by not letting you run while navigating the interaction menu. And that's where the first person control scheme comes into play. I cannot recommend standard FPS more. I think it's by far the best control type for first person view. To run, all you have to do is click the left stick like you're playing just about any other FPS out there. Just one click and you're running until you decide to stop. And it allows full control over the interaction menu while you run. You're definitely not going to want to use standard here. Using A to run at first person just feels really clunky and off. And if you make a left or right turn, your character will do kind of a stutter step and stop running for a second, which is annoying. And you have to constantly hold down the button. The same goes for standard FPS2 here. You have to hold down that RB button the entire time you want to run, which you don't have to do with the regular standard FPS. So for me, if I ever need to run while using the interaction menu, I just switch to first person real quick and use that to run while navigating the menu. And to me, that's just the best strategy, using the interaction menu while in first person as opposed to third, because in third person, you're controlling your character movement, your camera movement, which are independent from each other, and then also trying to navigate the menu while running. While in first person, the camera moves with your character direction, so it's one less movement you have to compensate for while you use the menu. Bottom line though, use whatever feels comfortable for you in third person, and in first person, I highly recommend standard FPS. So you know how you can double tap down on the D-pad to expand your minimap? Well, what if I told you that there was a way you can keep it expanded like that permanently? In the display settings, if you turn expanded radar on, it does just that. You still have to hit down on the D-pad for the player names to show up, but if you're PvPing, this is probably going to do more good than bad. It does take up more of your screen, but at the same time, you get that much bigger minimap to help your situational awareness. You can see what players or vehicles are coming after you more easily. I'm personally kind of torn on this setting though. I really wish it worked a different way like it does in RDR2. In RDR2, if you held down on the D-pad, you could just hit a button to make the map bigger and have it stay like that. And then if you wanted it small again, you could just do the same thing to shrink it back down. A system like that would be nice because if I'm driving around, I don't really want a giant map there. But if I'm PvPing or flying around in a public lobby, I do want it on so I can have that awareness. And having to open up the settings from the pause menu to change it every time just gets annoying. So if it was something more like what you're seeing now, where say I'm holding down the D-pad and I press Y, if that just turned the map to expanded, that would be great. And then if I wanted to turn it off, I would just hold it down and press Y again. Also, side note, this setting does break when free mode events pop up. They shrink your map back down and you'll either have to wait a bit or re-enable the setting for it to work again in the pause menu. So that's kind of annoying. But overall, this setting is useful. I just wish there was a better system to enable and disable it. Now, if you were to learn anything from this video, I want it to be this. The aim preference setting. You have two choices, assisted aim partial or assisted aim full. There's a lot of people that don't exactly know the difference between these. You want to go with assisted aim full 9 times out of 10. It is objectively better at just about everything. Starting off with the lock on width, which is how close you have to actually aim the camera looking at the target for the game to auto aim onto them. And with the full setting, you can see there is a very wide area where I can have my camera looking and still get the lock on the target. Whereas with partial, it's a lot less of a width. I have to have them much closer to the center of my screen to get a lock on them. And looking at this image comparing both of them, you can see it's a massive difference. And that extra width helps for multiple scenarios. Number 1, third person corner peeking. You are able to grab a lock-on much easier on an enemy around a corner using full just by getting them in your camera and hitting ADS, which will lock onto the enemy basically through the wall, and from there you just have to run around the corner already locked onto their head and blast them the moment you see them. Don't get me wrong, you can still do this with partial, but you have to do it way later because you have to wait until they're more centered on your screen. The second thing, auto-aiming oppressors and just other flying vehicles is much easier with assisted aim full. You just don't have to have them as centered in your screen as you do for assisted aim partial, which lets you get that lock on and try to kill them with either a musket or any weapon you want a lot faster. And probably the biggest perk of assisted aim full that partial does not have at all is the ability to target swap. When you use assisted aim full, if you aim at a target, you can flick the right stick to the left or right to quickly switch your lock on to another target, It's practically aimbot, if I'm being honest. The other target doesn't even have to be on your screen, as you're seeing here, and I could just quickly swap between them, to where if I was trying to kill both of them, I would just have to shoot one and then quickly flick to the other one, and they'd both be dead in a second. This is actually way more useful in PvE to quickly clear out groups of enemies, because in PvP, you're not usually in a situation where you have a huge group of enemies at once that you have to target swap through, unless you're doing an RNG map or something. But if you use assisted aim partial and you want to try to target swap, you have to re-ADS onto the other target, which is a whole lot more clunky and much slower. So definitely use assisted aim full. Trust me, you're not going to regret it. The reason I said it's better 9 times out of 10 though is because every once in a while you will lock onto the wrong target if there are a lot of targets on screen, but that's a very small disadvantage to trade for the amazing benefits you get with assisted aim full. In terms of free aim, I really don't think free aim assisted should exist. It's essentially a small lock-on in a free aim lobby, which I think is dumb and ruins the entire point of free aim, to aim without any assistance. So I really don't want to advocate for being an asshole and recommend free aim assisted because, like I said, I don't agree with it. And the final setting I want to discuss today is the switch handbrake control option. By default, your handbrake is the R1 or right bumper. If you turn this on, it switches the handbrake to A or X, and then RB or R1 becomes your duck button in the vehicle. I think it's much easier for the handbrake to be on the A or X button. It's just kind of my preference because, once again, the GTA games I grew up playing, the handbrake was always that button. And same with a bunch of other racing games from that era. So it's just more natural to me. But as a side benefit, and the reason I'm talking about this, is I think it makes it easier to shunt hop with the arena war vehicles with this on. You have to hold the handbrake in the air in order to control the vehicle. And with A being handbrake, it just lets me focus on using RB and LB or R1 and L1 to be the shunt direction indicators, as opposed to using RB for the handbrake to control your car midair, and then holding RB and A to launch upwards again. I guess it is just more of a personal preference at the end of the day, but I think if you're new to shunt hopping and finding it difficult, switching the handbrake controls might help a bit. Anyways, those are 10 settings that you should change to improve your gameplay in GTA Online. I know I left out specific aim settings, and the reason for that is aiming settings, everyone is going to have a different opinion on. I like to snipe and play on near max sensitivity, but I'm also someone who plays on very high sensitivity for almost every game I play. And I know other people who snipe on lower sensitivity and they also make it work just fine. So that kind of stuff is more down to how you like to aim, whereas other settings I talk about in the video, I think are objectively better with how I have them set. Let me know what you guys think about this down in the comments, and are there any other settings that I didn't mention that you think are worth changing to improve your gameplay? I also want to thank my friends Xenon and Endercraft for helping me record for this video. If you enjoyed it or found it helpful, feel free to leave a like as well as subscribe to my channel for more GTA Online content. I want to give a huge shout out to my channel members for your support. If you'd like to become a member for some exclusive perks, you can either use the join button or the link that's down in the description. And as always, thanks for watching and have a great day.